The rusty iron gates of Pinewood Institute loomed ahead, casting a grotesque silhouette against the rising sun. The once grand facade was marred by peeling paint and shattered windows, an ominous testament to the horrors that lurked within. The man behind the wheel slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding to a stop with a shower of gravel. He turned to them, his weathered face finally illuminated by the faint light. A single, jagged scar ran from his temple to his jaw, and his eyes, cold and calculating, held a glint of something akin to madness. "This is where you get off," he rasped, his voice rough and gravelly. What about David?" Ashley stammered, her heart pounding against her ribs. The man's lips twitched into a humorless smile. "David served his purpose. Now it's your turn." Before she could protest, he yanked Sarah from the back seat, her cries lost in the desolate emptiness of the morning. He then grabbed Ashley, his grip like a vice. "Don't worry," he hissed, his words laced with a chilling promise. "We'll fix you both." Ashley struggled, kicking and screaming, but her efforts were futile. Dragged towards the dilapidated gates, she caught a glimpse of the charred finger still clinging to Sarah's arm, seemingly pulsing in sync with the faint, malicious light emanating from the depths of Pinewood Institute. As the iron gates clanged shut behind them, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the air, a scream that could have been Sarah's, or David's, or perhaps even a monstrous echo of a past victim. The world dissolved into darkness, the chilling promise of fixing hanging in the air, a terrifying unknown that sent shivers down Ashley's spine. Inside the walls of Pinewood, the silence held a different kind of terror. It wasn't the silence of emptiness, but of anticipation, of secrets waiting to be unearthed. Ashley knew, with a horrifying certainty, that whatever awaited her within these walls was far worse than anything she'd faced before. The nightmare that began at Elmwood had taken a disturbing turn, and Pinewood Institute was just the beginning of a new, terrifying chapter, a chapter with no clear ending, only endless corridors of darkness and the chilling promise of a twisted redemption. The sterile white walls of the Pinewood examination room felt like a mockery. A single, flickering bulb cast grotesque shadows across the metal table where Ashley lay strapped down. The scent of disinfectant burning her nostrils. The man who brought them, the scarred stranger, stood beside the table, his face obscured by the harsh light. His hands, calloused and scarred, held a syringe filled with a viscous, amber liquid. "Don't worry," he rasped, his words echoing in the sterile silence. "This will help you remember." Ashley fought against the leather restraints, panic fueling her desperate struggle. "Remember what?" she screamed, her voice hoarse. "Who you are," the stranger replied, his voice devoid of emotion. Before she could protest further, he plunged the syringe into her arm. The world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of fragmented memories, violent and terrifying. A childhood spent within the walls of Pinewood, subjected to experimental treatments under the watchful eyes of sadistic doctors. A friendship with a troubled boy named David, a connection forged in shared fear and a desperate yearning for escape. And then, the fire. A blinding inferno that consumed everything, leaving only darkness and a chilling emptiness. As the memories flooded back, raw and brutal, a searing pain erupted in her head. She screamed, a primal sound ripped from her throat. The stranger remained impassive, watching her writhe on the table. Then, a low chuckle escaped his lips. "There it is," he said, his voice laced with a twisted satisfaction. "You're remembering. You're remembering Jeff." A new wave of terror washed over Ashley. Jeff wasn't just a monster, a figment of their nightmares. He was real. And somehow, he was a part of her. The room began to spin, the sterile walls morphing into a twisted reflection of the burning asylum. In the flickering light, she saw Sarah, strapped to a similar table, her face contorted in pain. But beside her, instead of the scarred stranger, stood something else. A figure shrouded in shadow, its form shifting and unsettling. "Gotcha," a raspy voice echoed, not from the figure itself, but from within Ashley's own head. A bone-chilling laugh, a horrifying blend of Ashley's scream and the raspy voice, filled the room. The room, the building, the very world around her seemed to warp and twist, morphing into a grotesque playground of terror. Suddenly, a new wave of pain, sharp and blinding, tore through her. She screamed, a sound that ripped through the fractured reality. Then, silence. When Ashley finally opened her eyes, the examination room was back to normal. The stranger was gone, the restraints lay discarded on the floor. She sat up slowly, her body racked with pain, her mind reeling from the horrific memories and the disturbing revelation. Across the room, Sarah stirred on the other table, the charred finger seemingly pulsating faster on her arm. Was it Jeff, or a twisted fragment of his legacy implanted within her? Their escape, their plan, everything felt a million miles away. They were trapped within the walls of Pinewood, their worst fears weaponized against them. The silence was deafening, filled with an unspoken question. How could they escape a monster that now resided within themselves? As Ashley looked at Sarah, their eyes met, a shared terror reflected in their depths. The fight for survival had taken a horrifying turn, and the battleground was no longer the decaying halls of Elmwood, but the very core of their being. The line between victim and monster was blurring, and they weren't sure if they would survive the descent into the darkness that now threatened to consume them. A guttural growl echoed from the hallway outside the room, sending shivers down Ashley's spine. Grasping at the discarded restraints, she tossed them towards Sarah, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Get them on," she hissed, urgency lacing her voice. Sarah, eyes wide with terror, fumbled with the leather straps, the charred finger on her arm twitching with a life of its own. The growl grew closer, a monstrous symphony of guttural sounds. "Who's there?" Ashley called out, her voice barely a whisper. Silence. Then, a sickening thud against the metal door. The door handle rattled, twisting violently as something slammed against it from the other side. Panic clawed at Ashley's throat. The fixing, the scarred stranger mentioned, was this the result? Was this Jeff, reborn in a new, monstrous form? The door creaked, the metal groaning under the relentless assault. Ashley kicked aside a metal tray, grabbing the scalpel that lay forgotten on it. It was a pathetic weapon, but it was all she had. With a deafening crash, the door splintered inwards, revealing a horrific spectacle. The figure that stood before them was a grotesque amalgamation of flesh and metal. Scraps of the Asylum uniform clung to its twisted body, parts of which were replaced by jagged steel exposed through torn muscle. Its face, a mangled mess once belonging to the scarred stranger, was contorted in a feral snarl. The scalpel trembled in Ashley's hand, its meager size a mockery against the monstrosity that charged at them. But before it could reach them, a blood-curdling scream ripped through the room. Sarah, her eyes blazing with a horrifying light, lunged forward. The charred finger on her arm, now glowing malevolently, pulsed with a dark energy. It extended, morphing into a grotesque claw, dripping with a viscous black liquid. With inhuman speed, the claw ripped through the creature's chest, tearing open a gaping wound. The monster roared in pain, a sound that sent shivers down Ashley's spine, but the attack seemed to invigorate it rather than subdue it. It lashed out, a fist of metal connecting with Sarah's jaw. She crumpled to the ground, a sickening crack echoing through the room. Fury surged through Ashley. Ignoring the scream of protest from her wounded shoulder, she charged the creature, the scalpel glinting in the dim light. The creature turned its glowing yellow eyes on her, a deranged grin splitting its face. It raised a hand, its metallic fingers crackling with electricity. Just as it unleashed a bolt of energy, a deafening explosion ripped through the room. The windows shattered, showering them with glass. Dust and debris filled the air, obscuring the creature's form. Ashley stumbled back, coughing, her vision blurred. Through a haze of smoke, she saw a figure emerge from the doorway. It was David, his face blackened with soot, a makeshift flamethrower still in his hand. "Let's go," he yelled, grabbing Ashley's arm and pulling her towards the broken window. there was no time to check on Sarah, not now. They had to escape the collapsing building, the screams of the monstrous entity fading into the background as they scrambled through the shattered window. They landed hard on the asphalt outside, the weight of their escape pressing down on them like a physical burden. David helped Ashley to her feet, his grip tight on her arm. "We need to get out of here," he rasped, his voice strained, but as they turned to run, they froze. In the distance, amidst the smoke and flames engulfing Pinewood, they saw a figure rise from the debris. It was Sarah, or at least what remained of her. Her body was a twisted mass of flesh and metal, the charred finger now a monstrous claw, pulsing with a malevolent light. Her eyes, devoid of humanity, glowed with a cold, predatory hunger. "Gotcha," a voice rasped, a chilling echo of Jeff and the scarred stranger. But deeper, more primal, the twisted figure took a lumbering step towards them, its claws scraping against the ground. Ashley knew, with a chilling certainty, that this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning of a new horror, a new nightmare fueled by a twisted entity that transcended human form. She turned and ran, David by her side, their screams lost in the cacophony of the inferno behind them. The line between victim and monster had blurred beyond recognition, and Ashley knew the fight for survival had just taken a terrifying turn. Their lungs burned, legs screaming in protest as they sprinted through the desolate woods bordering Pinewood Institute. The inferno raging behind them cast an eerie orange glow on the twisted trees, their silhouettes menacing claws reaching into the night sky. David, his face blackened with soot, glanced back once, a flicker of despair in his eyes. "We can't outrun it," he rasped, his voice hoarse. Ashley knew he was right. The inhuman entity that had been Sarah was built for destruction, tireless and relentless. But where could they go? Everywhere felt like a dead end. Suddenly, David skidded to a halt, his eyes widening. A dilapidated wooden shack loomed before them, barely standing against the encroaching forest. Smoke curled from a cracked chimney, a faint sign of life in the midst of desolation. "There," he yelled, pointing towards the shack. "Maybe someone can help," a desperate hope flared in Ashley's chest. Help might be a stretch, but it was their only shot. They burst through the rotting wooden door, the stench of damp wood and decay assaulting them. Inside, a single flickering oil lamp cast long, grotesque shadows across a dusty room. An old woman, her face etched with a lifetime of hardship, sat in a rocking chair, her cloudy eyes staring vacantly into the distance. Before Ashley could speak, a guttural growl echoed from behind them. The shack door splintered outwards, revealing the monstrous figure of Sarah. Its metallic claws scraped against the floor, the charred finger, now a wicked scythe, dripping with a viscous black liquid. The old woman's head snapped towards the creature, her cloudy eyes widening in recognition. "Jeffrey," she croaked, her voice raspy and aged. "They brought you back." A cold dread washed over Ashley. Was Sarah, Jeffrey, connected to this woman somehow? But there was no time for questions. The old woman cackled, a horrifying sound that echoed eerily in the small shack. "Let the cleansing begin," she shrieked, raising a gnarled hand. The room pulsed with a dark energy. Tendrils of shadow erupted from the floor, snaking towards Ashley and David. They screamed, struggling against the invisible bonds. The old woman cackled again, her eyes glowing with a malevolent light. She pointed a bony finger at Sarah. "Destroy them, Jeffrey." Sarah, her face devoid of any human emotion, lunged forward, the scythe glinting in the dim light. David, with a desperate roar, threw himself between Ashley and the creature. Ashley's world tilted on its axis. Grief threatened to consume her, but primal fear fueled a new surge of adrenaline. She grabbed the nearest object, a rusted iron poker from beside the fireplace, and lunged. The metal clanged against Sarah's metallic arm, sending a jolt of pain through Ashley's hand. The creature turned its glowing eyes on her, a deranged grin splitting its face. "You can't stop me," it rasped, its voice a chilling echo of Sarah, Jeff, and the old woman fused into one. Ashley knew it was right. Alone, she stood no chance. But then, a flicker of movement in the corner of her eye caught her attention. The old woman, weakened by her dark ritual, slumped forward in her rocking chair, her chest heaving. Beside her, on a rickety table, lay a vial filled with an iridescent liquid. Desperate hope flared within Ashley. Was that what they needed to stop the creature? Before Sarah could react, Ashley lunged for the table, grabbing the vial. "What are you doing?" the old woman rasped, her voice weak. Ending this, Ashley yelled, uncorking the vial. The creature lunged, its scythe whistling through the air. Ashley dodged in the nick of time, the vial clutched tightly in her hand. With a desperate prayer, she hurled the vial at Sarah. The iridescent liquid splattered across the creature's face, a sizzling hiss filling the air. Sarah screamed, a sound that was both human and inhuman. Her body convulsed, the shadows binding Ashley and David dissolving into wisps of darkness. The creature stumbled back, its glowing eyes flickering erratically. Then, with a final, earth-shattering scream, it collapsed, its body dissolving into a pile of ash and bone. Silence descended upon the shack, so thick it felt tangible. Ashley, chest heaving, coughed on the acrid smoke swirling in the air. David lay motionless on the floor, a crimson pool spreading beneath him. Hope battled with despair in her gut. Did she just win? A glance at the old woman confirmed her suspicions. Her eyes, glazed and vacant, stared sightlessly ahead. The vial, now empty, lay shattered at her feet. Suddenly, a twitch from the pile of ash and bone caught Ashley's eye. A single, blackened finger, identical to the one once attached to Sarah, twitched faintly. Panic surged through her. It couldn't be. The finger pulsed with a malevolent light, then began to writhe, dragging itself across the floorboards. Ashley scrambled back, her gaze flickering between the twitching finger and David. He wasn't moving. With a sickening crack, the finger split open, revealing a blackened, skeletal hand. The hand reached out, grasping a shard of bone. Within seconds, the shard morphed and contorted, forming a grotesque miniature scythe. A guttural growl, far weaker than before, echoed from the pile. The darkness around the pulsating finger seemed to coalesce, slowly forming a shadowy, skeletal figure. It was a mere mockery of the monstrous entity it once was, but its malevolent intent was undeniable. Tears streamed down Ashley's face, a mix of grief, fear, and exhaustion. She was alone, injured, and facing a seemingly unkillable entity. But as she looked at the miniature scythe the creature clutched, a flicker of defiance sparked in her eyes. She grabbed the iron poker from beside the fireplace, its weight of comfort in her hand. This wasn't over. Not yet. She had to fight, for David, for Sarah, for herself. With a ragged scream, Ashley lunged at the creature, the flickering oil lamp casting grotesque shadows of their struggle on the dusty walls. The clang of metal met bone, the air filled with the stench of burnt flesh and desperation. The fight was brutal, a dance of pain and fury. Ashley, fueled by adrenaline and grief, attacked with a ferocity born out of survival. The creature, weak and incomplete, countered with surprising speed and a relentless hunger. Blow after agonizing blow, Ashley chipped away at the shadowy form, the iron poker leaving glowing gashes in its darkness. The creature clawed at her, its miniature scythe drawing shallow wounds across her arms. Finally, with a desperate lunge, Ashley managed to knock the scythe from the creature's grasp. She brought the poker down with all her remaining strength, aiming for the pulsating finger, the source of its power. The iron met bone with a sickening crack. The creature shrieked, a sound of pure, primal anguish. The light emanating from the finger flickered, then died out completely. The shadowy form convulsed one last time before dissolving into a wisp of smoke, leaving behind only ashes and the stench of burnt flesh. Ashley collapsed onto the floor, her body racked with pain and exhaustion. Tears streamed down her face, a mixture of relief and sorrow. She had survived, but at what cost? David lay unmoving beside her, a constant reminder of the price of her victory. As the first rays of dawn filtered through the cracked windows, painting the shack in a sickly yellow light, Ashley closed her eyes. The nightmare was over, for now. But a chilling truth settled in her heart. There would be no happy ending. The darkness that had consumed Elmwood and Pinewood, the darkness that had taken Jeff, Sarah, and David, that darkness lived within her. It was a part of her now, a scar that would never truly heal. She would carry the burden of what she had witnessed, what she had done. But she would also carry the knowledge, the grim determination to fight, to be vigilant. They were quiet now, filled with a suffocating darkness and a single, persistent whisper, "Gotcha." The sound, a chilling blend of Jeff, Sarah, and the monstrous entity, echoed in her mind, a constant reminder of the price of survival. One day, a worn manila envelope arrived in the mail. Inside, a single photograph, yellowed with age, stared back at her. It depicted a group of children, their faces beaming with a youthful innocence. In the center, a young Ashley stood with her arms slung around a boy with a mischievous grin, David. Beside them stood a girl with bright eyes and a hesitant smile, Sarah. Below the picture, a single scrawled sentence sent a jolt of ice through Ashley's veins. "They're coming home." "We're waiting," panic surged through her. The nightmares weren't just nightmares. The darkness, the whispers, they were a calling. They were coming home. A frantic search led her to a dilapidated building on the outskirts of town, its boarded-up windows like vacant eyes staring back at her. It was the place in the photograph, the place where the terror began, Blackwood Orphanage. Pushing against the decaying door, Ashley entered, the scent of dust and neglect assaulting her senses. The hallways were shrouded in an oppressive silence, broken only by the creak of her own footsteps. Memories, long buried under the weight of trauma, flooded back. Experiments, conducted by a sadistic doctor obsessed with the darkness that resided within some children. The whispers in the dead of night, promising power in exchange for pain. And then, the fire. A fire that supposedly took everyone's lives. Suddenly, a flicker of movement in the distance caught her eye. A figure, shrouded in shadow, emerged from a doorway at the end of the hallway. As it stepped closer, the darkness solidified, revealing a skeletal figure, its form a twisted echo of Sarah. A single, blackened finger pulsed with a malevolent light, mirroring the one that now throbbed beneath a scar on Ashley's own arm. The figure tilted its head, a grotesque grin splitting its face. "Welcome home, Ashley," it rasped, its voice a chilling echo of Sarah, laced with a familiar, mocking laughter. Ashley's heart hammered against her ribs. They weren't coming home. They were already here, twisted and reborn from the darkness that had consumed them. And this time, it wasn't just Elmwood or Pinewood. This time, the battleground was Blackwood, the place where it all began. With a deep breath, Ashley steeled herself. Grief and terror threatened to consume her, but a newfound resolve flickered in her eyes. She wouldn't let the darkness win again. Pulling the iron poker from her backpack, the weight of familiar comfort in her hand, Ashley stepped forward, a fierce defiance replacing her terror. "This ends now," she growled, her voice echoing in the desolate halls. The figure laughed, a sound that sent shivers down her spine. But this time, there was a flicker of uncertainty in its glowing eyes. Ashley wasn't the same scared girl who once walked these halls. She was scarred, broken, but not defeated. The fight for survival was about to begin again, within the decaying walls of Blackwood Orphanage. The battleground might have shifted, but the stakes remained the same, life or a descent into a darkness that threatened to consume them all. The iron poker felt heavy in Ashley's hand, a cold promise of resistance against the monstrous parody of Sarah that stood before her. Blackwood Orphanage, once a place of stifling childhood memories, now echoed with a chilling silence broken only by the rasping breaths of the encroaching entity. The figure lunged, its skeletal hand reaching for Ashley with unnatural speed. Driven by a mix of desperate rage and a newfound understanding of the dark energy coursing through her veins, Ashley ducked under the attack. The poker swung in a vicious arc, catching the creature's shoulder with a sickening crunch. A bone-chilling shriek erupted from the entity, a sound laced with raw pain and a surprising vulnerability. Ashley, emboldened, pressed the attack. She swung the poker again and again, each blow fueled by the ghosts of Elmwood and Pinewood, by the memory of David and the chilling promise of gotcha. The creature, though weakened, fought back with a ferocity born of desperation. Its barbed claws raked across Ashley's arm, leaving a trail of burning gashes. The pain was excruciating, but Ashley ignored it, fueled by a primal instinct for survival. The battle raged on, a brutal dance of violence played out on the dust-covered floor of the orphanage. The flickering shadows cast by the single, dusty window danced across the twisted tableau, morphing into grotesque spectators. Suddenly, the creature stumbled back, a gaping hole torn in its chest where Ashley's last blow landed. A surge of dark energy pulsed from the wound, tendrils of shadow lashing out at Ashley. She cried out, the iron poker clattering to the floor as she was thrown back against the wall. The entity, its skeletal frame barely holding its form together, limped towards her, its glowing finger dripping with a viscous black liquid. The familiar, mocking laughter echoed within Ashley's mind, gotcha. But as the entity reached for her, another tendril of darkness, stronger this time, erupted from her own scar. It pulsed with a familiar light, intertwining with the tendril from the creature, forming a grotesque bridge of dark energy. A horrifying realization dawned on Ashley. This wasn't just a battle, it was a twisted connection, a dark pact forged in the flames of Blackwood. The entity wasn't just fighting her, it was trying to merge with her, to consume her from within. Panic threatened to engulf her, but then, within the darkness, a flicker of defiance sparked. A voice, faint yet familiar, echoed in her mind, David's voice, a whisper from beyond the grave. Fight it, Ashley. Fight for both of us. With a newfound resolve, Ashley screamed, a primal roar that echoed through the orphanage. The dark energy pulsing from her scar intensified, pushing back against the entity's tendril. The grotesque bridge of darkness writhed, a battle of wills waged on an unseen plane. As Ashley fought, a vision flickered before her eyes, a vision of the fire, of Sarah and David trapped within the flames. Tears welled up in her eyes, but they were tears of determination. She wouldn't let the darkness win. She wouldn't let their sacrifice be in vain. With a final, earth-shattering scream that ripped through the silence of the orphanage, Ashley pushed back against the entity. The darkness within her surged, fueled by grief and a desperate love for the friends she had lost. The bridge of darkness convulsed, then snapped with a deafening crack. The creature shrieked, a sound of raw agony as the dark energy ripped it apart. Its skeletal form crumbled into a pile of ash, leaving behind only the chilling whisper of the mocking laughter fading into nothingness. Ashley collapsed onto the floor, her body racked with pain and exhaustion. Silence descended upon Blackwood Orphanage, broken only by her ragged breaths. She had won. But at what cost? The darkness within her pulsed faintly, a constant reminder of the battle she had waged. Was it truly over, or had she simply pushed the entity back, leaving a scar deeper and more insidious than any physical wound? Ashley looked at the pile of ash, a single, charred finger lying innocuously among the remains. A wave of nausea washed over her. The fight for survival might be over, but the real battle, the battle to control the darkness within, had just begun. As the weak rays of dawn filtered through the dusty window, painting the orphanage in a sickly light, Ashley knew one thing for certain: the House of Horrors wasn't just Blackwood Orphanage. It was her, and the shadows within would continue to haunt her. The perfect ending? There was none. Only an unsettling quiet. The silence in Blackwood Orphanage was a living thing, thick and oppressive. Ashley lay sprawled on the dusty floor, the iron poker clattering beside her like a fallen soldier. Her vision swam, a kaleidoscope of victory in horrific memories. The entity was gone, reduced to a pile of ash that mocked her with its deceptive ordinariness, but the victory tasted hollow. The darkness within her throbbed like a wounded beast, a constant reminder of the monstrous dance she'd just performed. A single, choked sob escaped her lips, a lament for the friends she'd lost, for the innocence stolen, and for the horrifying cost of survival. As she lay there, gathering the remnants of her strength, a new sound pierced the silence. A scraping noise, faint at first, but growing with each agonizing second. It came from the direction of the doorway, a slow, deliberate drag across the floorboards, panic clawed at Ashley's throat. The entity was dust. No, that was wishful thinking. This was something different, something far more terrifying. With a Herculean effort, she pushed herself up, her body screaming in protest. Blood streamed down her arm, a crimson reminder of the creature's touch. She stumbled towards the window, the shattered glass offering a precarious escape route, but as she reached for the jagged frame, the scraping sound stopped. A long, chilling silence followed, broken only by the ragged rasp of her own breaths. Then, a voice. A voice that sent shivers down her spine, a voice that was a horrifying echo of David, Sarah, the monstrous entity, and something else entirely. It was a voice that seemed to emanate from within her own head, yet from somewhere far beyond. Gotcha, it rasped, the familiar, mocking laughter laced with a new undercurrent of something primal. Something hungry. Ashley whirled around, her heart hammering against her ribs. The doorway was empty. But on the floor, amidst the swirling dust motes, lay a single, blackened finger, identical to the one that pulsed beneath her scar. It twitched once, then twice. Then, with a sickening crack, it began to writhe, dragging itself across the floorboards. As Ashley stared in a mixture of terror and morbid fascination, a new form began to coalesce around the finger. It wasn't the monstrous entity she had just vanquished. This was something smaller, more insidious. A grotesque parody of a child, its skeletal form shrouded in a sickly green mist. Its eyes, two glowing embers in the gloom, locked onto Ashley with a predatory hunger. Welcome home, it rasped, its voice a chilling echo of the countless whispers that had haunted her nightmares. We've been waiting. Ashley, her body a mess of pain and exhaustion, knew this was just the beginning. The entity was gone, but the darkness it represented had found a new vessel, a new form to carry on its legacy of terror. This new creature, born from the ashes of the old, was smaller, weaker, perhaps. But it was also far more adaptable, far closer to her own core. This wasn't a monster she could fight with brute force alone. This battle would be waged on a different plane, a battle for the very essence of her being. With a deep breath, Ashley steeled herself. There was no escape, not this time. The fight for survival had become a fight for her own soul. As the grotesque child lunged, its skeletal claws glinting in the dim light, Ashley raised her hand, the scar beneath it pulsing with a dark energy that mirrored the creature's own. A scream ripped through the orphanage, a scream that was both defiance and despair. The battle raged on, a horrific symphony of violence and raw emotion played out within the decaying walls of Blackwood Orphanage. The perfect ending? There would be none. Only the endless nightmare of survival, a constant dance with the darkness that now resided within, a darkness that had found a new home.